Welcome to the big number. I'm back in my set. The season is here. Dan, you're my man. You're our man. How we doing?
What is this week's big number?
This week's big number, Dan, is 26th. That is what Giannis Antetokounmpo's supporting cast ranks in the NBA. 26th in the NBA. I did that study using estimated plus minus data from dunksandthrees.com. So Dan, what I did is I looked at every roster in the NBA, and then I ranked by best player according to estimated plus minus, the player value metric there. And I looked at 2 through 10. Which teams had the best supporting cast, ranked all 30 teams beyond the best player. And Giannis Antetokounmpo's supporting cast, 2 through 10 on the Milwaukee Bucks roster, is bottom 5. And the only other teams that have a worse starting supporting cast in the NBA right now is Utah, Charlotte, Brooklyn, and Washington.
That felt like I was getting punched in the gut with each one of those. When I hear Utah, I'm like, Charlotte, ooh, none of those feel particularly good. Being in that company, not exactly where you want to be if you've got big, your sights set on contending and late postseason runs, which we know Giannis does.
Yeah. And it really is a testament that they're projected by Vegas to have like 42.5 wins, or, that's the over-under. It's a testament to how good Giannis is.
Yes.
They could have basically, their supporting cast is that of a tanking team. Like, that is where we're at right now with, Miles Turner. Look, they did as good as you can imagine in a really difficult situation. Houdini'd themselves out of, Damian Lillard and his Achilles tear in the postseason. They were already thin as it was. And so they decided to stretch and waive Damian Lillard's contract over the next 5 years and bring in, over 4-year contract, $100+ million for Miles Turner, who can help fill the gap the void left by Brook Lopez, who is kind of this perfect spacing rim protector at the 5 next to Giannis. But even still, like, as useful as Miles Turner was for the Indiana Pacers during their miraculous Cinderella run to the NBA Finals, I kind of feel like if that's your second best player on your team and you're trying to win a championship, I'm not buying it. What I am buying, Dan, is this Shams Charania report for ESPN saying that more than ever, Giannis Antetokounmpo is kind of exploring his options around the league. And while he hasn't made a trade demand, he's essentially expressed a desire to go to New York if something does matriculate, or if he does want to leave. I know there's a lot of contingencies there.
Yes.
But the Knicks are being thrown about as a potential destination for Giannis. And I totally get it. Like, I totally get if Giannis is looking at this roster and seeing that the starting lineup is going to be Kevin Porter Jr., AJ Green, Derry Bird, as we like to call him, Kyle Kuzma, and Miles Turner. Or if you want Bobby Portis in there, okay, fine. If you want Gary Harris in there, fine. But these are all guys who are, I don't know, with the exception of Miles Turner, those are bench guys. Those are guys, nice rotation guys to have in the rotation, but not starter level caliber, championship contending caliber players. And so part of me thinks that Giannis didn't make the trade demand because he kind of needed to have the pretext for a trade demand. Is like this starting rotation, the lineup. I kind of feel like Giannis cares about how he's perceived out there, cares about Milwaukee, the city, the region.
Sure.
And I feel like if he makes a trade demand out this summer without seeing this group together, he might not have as much weight supporting him in that decision. So looking at this supporting cast being of a bottom 5 caliber in the league among the basement dwellers, I feel like we're just gearing up for a mid-season trade demand from Giannis Antetokounmpo. And he's won a championship in Milwaukee. Dan, I'm wondering what you think of this. Do we think that Giannis Antetokounmpo is going to last for the full season in Milwaukee?
I think yes, for a couple of reasons. One is just the sheer size of Giannis's contract and the kind of package it would require in return, like to bring him back, like what you'd have to send out an outgoing salary, the number of players that are likely going to have to be part of that, like adding up to his, I think, $54 or so million contract. And you'd imagine that if you're the Milwaukee Bucks, you're saying, we are really strapped for cap assets. We're really strapped for young talent. As you mentioned, there's really not a projectable young piece where you're like, that's someone to be excited about moving forward, which is like, that's the natural attrition of you've turned all of this young talent and draft picks and whatever you sort of didn't have nailed down first into Drew Holiday, then into Damian Lillard. And that's kind of like the killer in all this is, even something like things didn't work out in Phoenix in the Kevin Durant deal and you sent everything out to get Kevin Durant. The Suns were still able to recoup something by trading Kevin Durant, and that returns Jalen Green and Dylan Brooks and the number 10 pick used on Kamal Malawach. And like, there's stuff you can get back to start fresh or start something moving forward to kind of kickstart whatever comes next. Having Lillard rupture his Achilles at that point in the postseason and at his age and with what was left on his deal, the Suns, or the Bucks rather, were not able to reroute him and turn him into stuff you could use, raw materials for a rebuild. So then you're, as you mentioned, you're in that position of, we've got to make a bold move and do the best we can to do something for today. And that results in Miles Turner, but it results in Miles Turner with no like additional draft capital or young pieces. So if you're the Bucks and you're saying, we're going to be bad, we've got to, and our draft assets are all over the place. We need stuff coming back and we need young players and we need multiple players to fill in that salary. If that's a lot to get done in February, that's when rosters are smaller, like in the offseason, you can have, I think up to 21 players on a roster without having to waive people, only 15 during the regular season. In the season, your teams are much tighter up against whatever their apron or their luxury tax burdens are going to be. They might have less flexibility to be able to bring in more money than they sent out based on how they've built their roster heading into the season. The restrictions are much tighter, and the size of the needle you have to thread is even more narrow in season. I think combine that with, as you mentioned, Giannis maybe gives himself the out of being able to say, listen, we gave it the old college try. I gave the roster as John Horst put it together this summer. I gave it a full runway, a full season. We saw that it didn't really get us any closer to the end goal, which is a championship. Any goal south of that is not good enough for me. I do not see a pathway. I've given it the time. Now is the opportunity for me to say, I want something more, which that to me feels more likely than in January or in December. I say, hit the eject button. Let's get me out of here as soon as possible. That said, I wouldn't have expected that we'd head into media day and Giannis would say, like, all of the reporting this summer about me, maybe thinking about it somewhere else, is true. And then, on the eve of their first preseason game or whatever, like a new report saying that I've had my eye on New York. I didn't expect that either. So I don't know. Do you see an in-season move as particularly likely?
Oh, yeah.
You
I
do?
think all
Okay.
the reasons you laid out, Dan, I was like, is he going to come around to the idea that he's going to get moved? Like, I understand the roster crunch that happens, but also guys who were signed in free agency or re-signed and they have their trade restrictions lifted December 15th or January 15th.
Right.
We talked about this with Fred VanVleet a couple of weeks ago, is that the Houston Rockets are they got their hands tied until next couple months of the season because of those trade restrictions around players that signed in the offseason. I think John Horst, and whether it's Leon Rose or Mike Dunleavy Jr. or if it's Raphael Stone, they're going to have some coffee dates in the next few months to kind of sketch this out like Rob Pelinka and Nico Harrison did on the low last year. I think we're going to see a trade. I think Giannis has done more than enough to prove to the city of Milwaukee that he is going to run through a wall for them. And at this point, I think I just put the story out for Yahoo Sports. It's like the superstar trade paradox is the rebuilding team that sells the superstar oftentimes does better than the team that acquired the superstar, which is kind of backwards. You would think that the team that gets Giannis, gets Paul George or Russell Westbrook, Kevin Durant, James Harden, you think those teams add those MVP candidates to their squad as the missing piece on a super team, and they're just going to be cooking with gas. But I looked at the 11 trades, superstar kitchen sink trades where there's multiple first round picks and players going into a deal. 11 trades from 2019 to 2023. And Dan, of those 11 trades, those superstar trades, I'm talking AD, Russ, James Harden, Paul George, all of those, only 2 of them resulted in a championship. Only 2 out of the 11 resulted in a finals appearance. And on the other side, the rebuilding team, Oklahoma City Thunder, oh yeah, we just won a championship with a lot of the pieces coming from those Russell Westbrook and Paul George trades back in 2019. You look at the Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown championship last year in 2024, that was a result of that infamous Brooklyn Nets trade with Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett. You look at 2022 or 2023 with the Denver Nuggets. Jamal Murray, as you know, was originally that pick to land Jamal Murray was the Knicks pick that they traded for Carmelo Anthony in 2017. The pick ended up being 2017. So I guess what I'm trying to say here, Dan, is if I'm John Horst, I've really tried to make this work, but I wouldn't be afraid of moving Giannis because oftentimes, it might be a longer runway, but the best chance at winning a championship in Milwaukee again might be saying goodbye to Giannis and getting a full mother load of picks and young talent. Because as we're seeing with Houston too, Houston did the same thing with James Harden, Russell Westbrook. When that didn't work out, they pulled the plug, and now you see they have the second brightest future in the NBA according to ESPN's trade future team rankings, and the 30th team was the Phoenix Suns, which tried to make the super team thing work, traded everything for Kevin Durant, and now they have the bleakest future in the NBA. So I just wouldn't be afraid to do that. Obviously, the emotional ties and everything, I just kind of feel like it is time. And I think Giannis knows it's time, which is why he's like slow leaking this and slow playing this for what I think will happen is a deal gets done at the trade deadline. So that's my sense. I have no insider information on this, but given the fact that we've seen so many of these super team trades, superstar trades kind of not pan out, I don't know. Maybe you do it now sooner than later before other teams start to realize maybe it isn't as cracked up to be to trade for a 30-year-old star, even though he's a perennial MVP candidate. I don't know. For the asking price, it hasn't panned out as well as we thought.
Absolutely. But I wonder if like, so, and that's it's included in a wonderful piece that you wrote at Yahoo Sports. People should go and check that out. The Knicks know that too. And Giannis knows that too, right? Like the Knicks it was a different front office, but the Knicks were on the end of the Carmelo Anthony trade where there was that choice of, does Carmelo wait 6 months to sign in free agency, or do we make this trade now and gut the roster, sending out, the names are just hilarious now, but in that moment, sending out Danilo Gallinari and Wilson Chandler and Timofey Mozgov.
Don't forget about Raymond Felton.
Never forget about Raymond Felton. That was tantamount to a gutting of the roster, right? Like there wasn't a playoff caliber team there for Carmelo to join at that moment. And so if you are the Knicks and you're saying this has been a bit by bit, brick by brick rebuild to get to a point where you are a conference finalist and now one of the favorites to come out of the Eastern Conference with renewed depth, with the new head coach, Mike Brown, all that, the idea of multiple pieces out in the middle of the season to import Giannis and then try to retrofit around him in midstream might make you more reticent to make that move, even if it is obviously a no-brainer talent. And then if you're Giannis and you're saying the whole point of this is to get to a place where you're competing for championships, and New York would be a place that you see as a good pathway to do that, are you as likely to do you view the Knicks as quite as strong an opportunity if half the roster went out to come get you? And maybe the answer is yes, because you are Giannis Antetokounmpo and you're like, anywhere I am is good enough to do that. But I wonder if the opportunity is do it in January or February to get it done now, or wait till the end to the summertime where You are entering what could be the final season of your contract before a player option in 27-28. The sort of maximum amount of leverage you have to be able to say, I choose where I want to go. And you are going to work with me, Milwaukee, because I've meant all this to your franchise to get to where I would like to go. Maybe you get a little bit more control on what the return price is at that point. So your points are valid. And I wonder if knowing that both Giannis and the Knicks front office would say that is all the more reason to wait until later, because we've seen the downside risk of sending out all that stuff to get the one guy. And we want to make sure that it's really worth the squeeze for us.
So Dan, what's your first little number here to talk about this Giannis situation?
First little number, kind of another lens through which to view that, is minus 5.6. That's how many total estimated wins above replacement the Bucks lost this offseason, according to an analysis published last week by Neil Payne over at ESPN. Payne took a look at which NBA teams gained or lost the most value over the summer using his estimated version of WAR based on the Raptor metric that used to be published at 538. Basically, Payne added up the projected WAR of all the players a team added, like draft picks and signings and trades, added up the projected WAR of all the ones that went away, releasing, trading away, and then saw which one of those was bigger, what you added or what you lost. The tally in Milwaukee was that going from Damian Lillard, Brook Lopez, etc., to Miles Turner, Gary Harris, Cole Anthony, and the other players they've added, dropped the Bucks' projection by nearly 6 wins, minus 5.6. That's the third biggest drop in the league, behind only the Celtics, who lost Jason Tatum to an Achilles rupture and then traded half their rotation, and the Phoenix Suns, who, as we mentioned, traded away Kevin Durant. So nearly 6-win drop off there. And, there's caveats. These are projections and players can outperform their projections. And the Achilles tear meant Dame was going to drop to 0 no matter what. So you would have been a big drop off kind of no matter what. That's why part of the reason why the Celtics were so far down is losing Tatum. And it's also it's not necessarily a one-to-one thing of you won 48 games last year, minus 5.6. So you're talking about a 42.5 win team. Although it is notable that Las Vegas does see the Bucks. I think they're over under the number is 42.5, which is interesting in this context. But if you're Giannis and your eye test on what the roster looks like matches up with that back of the envelope math that we just saw a handful of wins walk out the door and we're probably more likely to be around a 500 team than we are fighting for home court or a title. Maybe it's understandable that this is the time where your eye starts wandering for real. The saber rattling of years past kind of really hits a new level in the story that we saw this week.
Yeah, and it's tough because it's not just the win drop that you mentioned. It's also that you have a bunch of dead salary on the books for the next few years, right? So not only are you downgrading, but you're also kind of eating into your roster flexibility a little bit by stretching and waiving Damian Lillard. So it kind of hurts twice, Yeah,
and to be clear on that, the $113 million that was left on Dame's contract, I think it was 112.6, but something like that. That now gets stretched over the next 5 seasons. So for the next 5 years, from now through 2030, the Bucks are going to have a $22.5 million dead roster charge on their books. They can't get rid of that. They can't find another way they can't trade that as an expiring or something like that. That's just going to be there. So every other team has the full salary cap. The Bucks have the full salary cap minus that 22.5. That's a pretty decent starter in today's NBA, or if not better than that amount of money per year. That's going to be a pretty significant impediment for sure.
Yeah, that's kind of like looking at Miles Turner as twice as expensive,
Right.
But I mean, I guess the other side is if you don't waive Dame, you just have his full contract on the books and you don't have Miles. It's just, man, they keep digging themselves or pushing themselves into this corner. And what you're basically describing is that if Giannis misses any time, this could get ugly real fast. Just based on the talent in, talent out, it could get really ugly really fast. And to Giannis's credit, he didn't make a trade demand last year when they started out 2-8. He could have. And maybe this is Giannis. What we saw last year is maybe we'll see it again this year, is that no matter how deep this hole gets, if he misses time or if the team is just really not gelling out of the gate, he might just be like, yeah, I'm going down. I'm going down with the ship. I'm not going to bail. But you said it there with the talent deficit. that we saw in the offseason, even with Miles Turner being added, they're going to miss Brooke Lopez. And I just think this is going to be a really tough season. Like if all of those players, those rotation players hit, still, I have a hard time seeing a 50-win team here. And that's probably what it's going to take to get into that championship contention. So, yeah, just another way to look at the dire situation there with Milwaukee, even with Horst signing Miles Turner to a 4-year deal there. What's your next little number?
Next little number is 2031. That's the year when the Bucks next control their own first-round pick, thanks to the past trades they've made to try to build around Giannis. You know, you mentioned the hole that they've dug for themselves. Giannis was holding the shovel for at least some of that, right? Like the idea of when they got to 2020 and it was like, there needs to be an all-in move here. We've run into a roadblock. That's Jrue Holiday. So the next,
right. And that by the way, Dan, that's one of the two teams that did one of these kitchen sink all-in deals with multiple picks with Jrue Holiday from New Orleans that worked out. That they did end up in a title in Milwaukee. So Giannis might be like, hey man, you know, I appreciate that. We got a title out of it and it did work. So for those who want to look at like the history of the superstar trades, that is one of the examples. But of course, a lot of the things that they did to get Jrue Holiday, they're still paying the bills.
Including these next two seasons. So 2026, the Bucks, there are two teams now that have swap rights on the Bucks pick. I guess it's the Pelicans from the Jrue Holiday deal. And then because of the Derek Queen draft night trade at the 2026 draft, the Hawks can get that pick. But either way, the Bucks don't control it. They will get a first round pick in 2026, but it will not be their own. So no matter how bad they are, it's, you know, they don't control it. 2027, Pelicans own it outright from the Jrue trade. So that's why, you know, when you often see these sort of superstar trades, the seller will often try to push the date of the picks coming back as far into the future as possible. The idea being like, yeah, we expect you're going to be really good over the next couple of seasons because you're getting this star talent. So we want the far future pick. So the Jrue Holiday trade was 2020. Now 2026 and 27, the Pelicans are getting return on that investment too. And then when they run into the wall in 2023, it's the Damian Lillard trade with Jrue Holiday going out. And so 2028 swap rights in Portland, 2029 the Blazers get the pick outright, 2030 swap rights again for Portland. So because of the Dame trade, so through the remainder of this decade, they do not control their own draft, their own first round draft pick. And I think the interesting, I mean, we expect that would mean that no matter what the trade would look like, there would need to be a lot of draft capital coming back. The thing that I'm curious about is if you're Milwaukee, again, not a gigantic market, not someplace that's going to be a free agency destination. You also have this $22.5 million cap charge that is, you know, you're going to make it more difficult for you to add talent. Do you need present tense good players now as much as you need that future talent? Like, are you looking at it and saying, we still have to try to be decent because there's no value in us being terrible? We don't control our picks.
It's fascinating. And it's one of the reasons why I think maybe the Knicks are more likely to get him, because you got Karl Anthony Towns on your team. And it's like, if you're the Milwaukee Bucks, do you pull like a Luka Doncic AD thing where it's like, we get back AD and we still go for it because we don't have our pick? If we do blow it up, unless we do a trade with New Orleans and Atlanta or some form of that, they're not going to be able to maximize their own tanking.
Yeah.
So like for them, maybe it's not as advantageous to go for a bunch of first round picks unless they get that Atlanta pick back. And that they can, and teams have done that before, which is they go and they make a trade so that if they do end up bottoming out, they will reap the benefits of that. But you point this out, you know, they don't have much flexibility here because of those all-in trades for Dame and Jrue. And I'll just point out, when I did this study of the 11 superstars that were acquired in these big trades, 6 out of the 11 were on another team within 3 years.
Yeah.
It's a rental. Oftentimes, if you're the Knicks, you're like, oh yeah, this is the missing piece. But so many teams had thought that, and then it blows up, and then they gotta resell or retrade that player for, 60 cents on the dollar. And so, to your point about like these teams that are savvy enough to be like, we want to kick the can down the road and get these picks down the road, not only is Giannis going to be older, but potentially he's going to be gone. And so it's another reason why I would be nervous if I'm acquiring Giannis. Obviously, he's a great player and all that, but does he get a change of heart when he goes to New York or if he goes to Golden State? And let's say things don't work out as well in these new situations. That's why I think a lot of these superstar trades don't end up nearly as well as they think, as they don't foresee all of the different puzzle pieces not fitting together. You just kind of hope it does, and you dream and you fantasize. Oh, it'd be great if we got Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, and James Harden together. Scary hours, right? And then within like 3 weeks, it all just it's evaporates right in a cloud of dust. So
it's the interesting thing with that, and I want to move on to the next little number in a second, but is because things falling apart in Brooklyn led to Durant going to Phoenix, and so Houston, who had traded James Harden to Brooklyn, when they were like, we're figuring out what we need to go, they were like betting the downside risk on Phoenix. After some of those deals, and it's like they didn't control their own picks, but they controlled Phoenix's picks.
Great.
And so then that becomes what you use to get, like, it's all this arbitrage. And like, I'm betting on you failing, and then I don't control my own future, but if I control your future and a slice of it and you go belly up, then I wind up coming out the winner. So then that, if I'm John Horst, I'm wondering, whose picks do I want? If I can't get my picks back, who do I have like less confidence in their ability to dig out? And then
who am I shorting?
Who am I shorting? And you're as the third or fourth team that might enter this. And there's going to probably need to be a third or fourth team to enter this because of our third little number, which is 1, which is how many tradable first round picks the Knicks have right now. And there's a number of people have done this analysis. I saw a longtime Knicks writer, Tommy Beer, ran through it. Right now, as it currently stands, the only pick the Knicks can trade is a top 8 protected 2026 first rounder from the Washington Wizards.
Which is zilch. That is not valuable.
Yeah, it's a fake pick because the Wizards are going to be ass again. And so it's going to fall in the top 8. And then if it doesn't convey this year, it becomes 2 second-round picks. So it's not even a real first. And again, if you're John Horst, you know that. You're not saying, well, that's what I'm doing. And the reason they don't have the draft capital is because of the Mikal Bridges trade when they sent out a handful of picks and swaps to the Nets. So the Knicks right now they can offer swap rights on 2026, 2030, and 2032. They got like a half dozen or so second rounders, but they don't really have anything in terms of draft picks right now to trade, which I think, to me, if Giannis is saying it's New York or nowhere else, and the Bucks are saying, look at what they can't offer us, that's what I think the idea of doing it now becomes a little bit harder to figure out.
Yeah. And then on top of that, if you're the Knicks, you would say, hey, let's wait till this summer and then we'll go for Giannis, because then we have another pick to offer.
Yeah, 2023 unprotected opens up at that point.
Here's the problem with that. Giannis's extension, he's eligible for an extension October 1st to sign October 1st, 2026. In order to get the full amount, he needs to be with the team with at least 6 months.
Right. So he'd need to be there
Knicks,
this season.
They can't really wait in the same way that they were worried about Carmelo Anthony not being able to sign, because they needed to get him in order to get his super bird rights or whatever you want to call it, and get his extension number as high as possible, because Carmelo wants that number to be as high as possible. And if you're a Giannis, you're like, yeah, I want to get that monster extension, but you can't do it this summer and still get that benefit. So it's this, cat and mouse game. I wonder if I just don't think the Knicks have enough to get the deal done. And maybe this is a way to stoke the marketplace and just to generate conversation, is if you think that Giannis wants to be in New York, maybe that creates leverage with other teams. And that is what John Horst wants, is like other teams to be like, oh, we can't let him go to New York. Can't let that happen. All right, fine. I'll throw in 2 extra first round picks to make it happen. So I think that's what really is going on here. But I do think that the Golden State Warriors are really interesting because they do have that $54 million contract in Jimmy Butler. And we did see Phoenix wanting Jimmy Butler and couldn't get it done. do you see yourself in a 3-team trade where Jimmy goes to Phoenix, Phoenix sends stuff to Milwaukee, and then Milwaukee sends Giannis to the Warriors. Warriors send first round picks over to the not Minnesota, Milwaukee Bucks. Like that, I don't know. That's interesting because we all like. I think Octagon. I think Steph Curry is represented by Octagon, which is the same representation. Stateside, keep your third eye open for Giannis. Every All-Star game, Giannis and Steph are just having an absolute blast. You could always tell they just light up around each other. So I'm wondering if, like, do they just say, look, if we have an opportunity to get Giannis, Jimmy Butler, we have like a 31-3 record with you, Draymond, and Steph, but that would be 34-0 if we had Giannis instead of you. So I don't know. There's 3-team ways that the Knicks can get involved, but do they have enough to make a superstar trade? I don't think they do.
Yeah, I mean, your teams with the most tradable first-round picks, you're looking at Oklahoma City, which, they just won the title. So I don't know that they're going to be rushing to do that. The Nets, doesn't seem likely. The Jazz, again, Houston has 9. That's something to keep an eye on. And they've also got Şengün, they've got Amen Thompson, they've got Reed Shepherd, they've got Jabari Smith Jr. That's one I might keep an eye on if we're talking about in season. But the Knicks, to your point, maybe not enough, which brings us to our 4th and final little number. I'll cop to something here. I'm reheating leftovers right now with this 4th little number. 3 or 4. That's how many first-round picks the Grizzlies reportedly offered in trades for OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges before the 2023 trade deadline. I used this little number when we were talking about Jimmy Butler trades last year because I was like, maybe Memphis is a Jimmy Butler team. Memphis wound up not being a Jimmy Butler team, but the fact of there was a point where the Grizzlies were this hot on OG Anunoby or Mikal Bridges, this kind of wing that they were willing to go multiple picks to make that happen. Whether Memphis is still in that, I mean, obviously a lot's changed in Memphis since then, so who knows if they would be. But that idea of there's maybe for these 3-and-D plus swings, like all defense caliber wings who could do something with the ball in their hands, can score 20 points. It would make sense that there's a market there. So if you're the Knicks, is that your pathway you start thinking about here? I have this opportunity for Giannis, but I got to get picks. I'm strapped for picks. Well, there was a time where those guys were both potentially valued at multiple picks on the market. Is there a way for you to then include them in the 3 or 4 team deal, turn them into picks that then turn into Giannis? And then I think your question is, what's left over if you're the Knicks after you've traded multiple starters? You mentioned Karl-Anthony Towns as a matching salary, and now you're talking about OG or Bridges going out in the deal to get picks. What's left over afterwards? What does your team look like? I think all that increasingly complicates the idea of doing this in season. But what do you think? What do you think that kind of middle pathway might be? That guy becomes picks, and then that turns into the package we send.
I think your take as a leftover that you reheated is like a stew that gets better the second day in the fridge, like a soup, like an Italian wedding, or like a chili that gets better the second day. It's not. What's the worst reheatable leftover? It's French fries, right? That's
fish. No, dude, fish. And if you're out here bringing back like a 2-day-old salmon, no thanks.
Oh yeah, but I don't even heat it up at that point. I just do a cold salmon.
Oh yeah. Oh, the classic dad over the sink shame eat. Yeah, that's for sure. That's how it gets down over the Devine household.
Yeah, but French fries, I'm out. Any sort of, you can't reheat French fries. I guess you could throw it in the air fryer, but that's a level of low that I would never associate with your take that maybe Memphis in a 3-team trade gets involved here to get either Mikal Bridges,
or maybe not Memphis, but like the Memphis of today, whoever that would be, that's saying like, we are that connective big wing away from where we want to go, and we're willing to pony up 2 or 3 or whatever picks to get there. I guess the fact that OG and Bridges are now cycled onto new contracts complicates that somewhat too. Like, they're making more now than they were when they were available at those deadlines. But I think that if you're the Knicks and you're saying, how do we get to a package today? That's the avenue you got to be thinking about. I got to turn one of the guys we targeted to build this finals team into picks to then go even bigger game hunting.